took the law and threw it away because there's nothing wrong. It's just for play. There's no law anymore. I want to steal from the rich and give to the poor. This is the Community Solutions Podcast. Jason Bradley, Andrew Richter, from deep in the bowels of our underground layer, where that noise you hear is the cry of a million liberals every time we hit the airwaves. What's going on, Andrew?
Oh, I don't know. That's probably true. You know, they've been crying in their skivvies quite a bit lately, haven't they?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of unrest.
You know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I said this last week, Jay. I've never seen a party in such disarray, discombobulated after a loss.
Yes.
I mean, the loss was 3 months ago, and
Right.
they're more discombobulated than they were then. I mean, the shock has worn off, you know, and even though I didn't think they'd win anyway, but I mean, the shock of the reality of the Republican Party is at the strongest it's been since 1928.
Yes.
Talked about this last time of governors and a majority of legislatures. You had to go back 96 years from that last time that happened.
And it seems, and I credit this a lot to President Trump, that they finally have the courage to be able to move on some things.
Well, let's hope. I mean, let's hope they don't, you know, their problem is they like to get in their own way. You know,
Well.
I mean, I've been, you can't wipe a smile off my face the last 2 weeks, but we'll see.
Well,
You know, I told you before, this one big bill stuff is a very bad idea. That's the last thing I want to see is a 2,000-page bill of stuff. And I don't
Right.
know, Speaker Johnson's got to get his head out of his rear because that's a very stupid idea. It gives every Democrat a reason to vote against anything that we push. And I want Democrats on the record. I've said that before. I want the senators from Nevada on the record on no taxes on tips. That's the bill. Nothing
Yep.
else in it.
that's all the longer it needs to be.
Exactly.
There are no taxes on tips.
No taxes on overtime. You go tell those working families that they're going to pay 3 times a rate that Bill Gates pays on his capital gains tax. You go ahead and vote against that.
Right.
So I mean, but you put that in a bill with 500 other things, they'll find 10 things I'll find 300 in there I don't like, and it'll become a garbage bill like it was in 2017. So I'm just concerned about that. It'll take 5 months to do. It'll take 5 more months to go in effect. And it's just that's the one thing that worries me right now. But I'll tell you what, taking the initial steps to dismantle the Department of Education,
Yes.
which Republicans have been talking about probably since Bill Bennett was President Reagan's
Yes.
education secretary. Finally, after 40 years, we've decided to actually do it. You know,
It's funny how that works,
yeah,
huh?
I know. It's like the Department of Energy's got to be next. I mean, you know, you think about it, we've spent billions of dollars on that department, and they've done nothing. There's nothing that you can show that department doing other than getting in the way of private sector innovation and energy production. They've
Right.
never produced 1 watt of electricity, 1 windmill, 1 solar panel, 1 gallon of oil. They've never produced anything.
Yeah, and all they do are subsidize things that don't work. So I'm with you on that. That it is useless. Get out of the way. There's no reason for you to regulate it. You know, just let the market
handle it. There's
Right.
those 9th and 10th Amendments are still there, right? Last time I
looked,
my pocket constitution went through the wash, but I think it's still there. Now I got to say this: I it's entertaining to watch these. I don't know why I watch these confirmation. You know, the first one that I really remember that was this. I don't remember the Robert Bork one. I was only like 9 years old then, or 10 maybe.
Yeah.
Remember the Clarence Thomas ones?
Yes.
Okay, that was the first time I remember it just being a circus. Mm-hmm. It was just a circus. I mean, Saturday Night Live did a great job parodying that. It was wonderful. But now they're all circuses. They're all circuses.
I don't think that Jackson Browne's was a circus. I think only when it's a nominee from a Republican president is it a circus.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like I said, I just wonder what happens when the cameras aren't there.
Right.
To listen to that senator that identifies as a man but screeches like a woman from Colorado, that was all. I mean, that had to be. He was looking for a viral YouTube moment, I think. I don't even remember his name. Doesn't matter.
No.
But you tell me, I mean, you watch these things, and look, there are substantive questions to ask. And the Republicans have jobs to do, too, here. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to ask substantive things. You know, after going through 4 years of lawfare and you know, putting people guilty of trespassing on January 6th on a terror watch list.
Oh, I know.
Putting parents at school boards on. After going through crap like that, you've got to be serious about this. It's not a joke. And to watch even the Republicans stink at asking questions. It's all, I mean, even they stink. I mean, I went back to, like, you know, when who's the Supreme Court lady that Biden put in there?
Yeah, Jackson Brown.
Oh, yeah, Jackson Brown. Or whatever. Yeah, well, what's her name?
I like all her records, but I don't think she's a good justice at all.
What was her name? What's her real name?
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Jackson Brown. Okay.
Yep, Jackson Brown.
So you remember when she said she didn't know what a woman was?
Yes.
And the Republicans did a great job of ridiculing her.
Right.
But they did a terrible job of asking her legal questions. My next question would be then, well, I suppose we should repeal Title IX then.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you don't know what a woman is, then then a woman can't seek a regress for college athletics. Mm-hmm. Not possible.
Well, that ended today.
Yeah, that's true. That's ended today. It's been murky for a few years. But, I mean, it was kind of like, you know, the next logical question should all be about any case involving a woman should be invalidated because you can't have a plaintiff. If you don't know what a woman is, then you either have to abstain yourself or you don't have any regress in the courts.
Right.
So, but again, these things. Now, the vote on Pam Bondi, and you and I talked about this off camera or off the air, is really a head scratcher. And I have one theory on what happened here. But when you look at her as Attorney General, I mean, the Democrats never even made a case against her in the hearings. It was all, like I said, we talked before, I said It was all, you represented Trump in Georgia. He denied that he won, did you? You contributed to Trump's PAC, didn't you? Yes, that was you. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's all BS. Now, I have a theory. I think what happened on Bondi was when all the Republicans indicated that they were going to, and it became a foregone conclusion, they just turned it into a circus.
Well, I hear that that's what they're doing with all of them from here on out.
Cash Patel, same thing. Yeah. I mean, no Republicans come out against him. He's going to get through. Mm-hmm. So they turned it into, Well, even with Doug Burgum, it's like, okay, how contentious is he? But yet, especially for the job he's up for,
right?
When you consider that.
But yet the Democrats are like, we are going to obstruct and we're going to filibuster. It doesn't matter who it is. They have filibustered every single appointee that's come up for nomination and confirmation.
Yeah, we're still waiting on half of them.
Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine.
I don't know. What is the point of this? I mean, what's the point of this? Who are they appealing to? I mean, look, I know political junkies like you and me have a hard time being normal, and I have a hard time relating to somebody who doesn't pay attention and doesn't watch the news and doesn't know who's. I can't relate to those people. But what is the purpose of, okay, person's going to get through. Mm-hmm. You can either ask them real questions that matter, or you can act like you're 12 years old. I mean, who is that? Who's that aimed at?
The left wing of their party. I mean, they have to appease the left wing of their party. Or
the left wing of their party is exactly what shot him in the leg.
Right.
They should tell the angry, wing of the party to be quiet. But
they won't, and we've seen that where when they don't toe the line, the left wing of their party will rise up and cause all sorts of commotion for them too, and it, that's when people get primaried and that seat moves further left.
Well, maybe. I mean, some of them beat back primary challenges.
Yeah, some of them did, but but it's really not because they stand in a different
Okay, but let
place.
me ask you this.
Yeah.
If a senator who's up in 4 years votes for Pam Bondi, is that really going to start a primary? I mean, if I walked into a bar and asked how many people knew who she was, maybe 5 people would know.
Yeah.
And remember, there's a dial of hate for conservative women.
Yeah.
That gets ratcheted up, and if you're good looking, it's ratcheted up even more.
Yeah.
When it's your girlfriend, like Donna Shalala and Janet Reno and all the women you used to date, Jay, then it's no big deal. Dianne Feinstein and who's the head of the teachers union? Your last flame.
Oh boy.
But when it's the women in the conservative who look good, that's when the hatred really ratchets it up.
I think it's less about that though, and more about, like I say, you got to keep your base angry at the Republicans and not at you. But it's not about 4 years from now. It's about today. They have to create commotion today, because if they create commotion today, it's in the news. The news carries it. The news can spin it. And
the news is paying no attention to them. It's
really,
all Trump.
Yeah.
The news is paying no attention. Chuck Schumer stands there with an avocado, and CNN laughed at him.
I know.
It was like, what did you do? A Corona and avocado? You're going to put it? It was just. Yeah. They can't make news like Trump can.
No,
they're drowning in it.
No, so they can't.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where they go. I don't care personally.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what. Like I've said this before, when Republicans get majorities, that's when they get. It's like they're a week before their wedding. They start getting cold feet. And I don't know. Democrats get majorities and they ramrod anything. The next election might as well be 50 years from now.
Yeah.
The Republicans, it's like, oh no, I got criticized on MSNBC. They wrote a naughty editorial about me at the New York Times. No, I don't know, but I don't want to know who got to Bill Cassidy. That's what I want to know. I almost called him David Cassidy last week. I was like, I want to know who got to him with RFK, because he was hemming and hawing and going back and forth. I want to know who made the call: Stephen Miller, maybe, or JD, maybe Trump himself, Susie Wiles.
Charlie Kirk's been raising that issue a lot, that they're going to get primary.
I would have called him and said, hey, dude, you're a Republican from Louisiana. You can get anybody to do that.
Oh,
we can take you to. We'll win that seat like nothing. So it must have been. I just want to know who. I like to know the inside dirt. That's what I like to know.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but one of them somebody made a call to him, because somebody, it was like the mob coming to Happy and on board. I don't know what. They could have pulled this. I can't see Thune doing that. It had to be somebody from the administration.
I'm sure.
And by the way, 26 can't come fast enough, though, because Mitch McConnell's got to get out of there, and I don't care about Susan Collins' seat. Yeah. I'd rather lose it. I'd rather lose than have her come in. I'm tired of kissing her ass. I don't want her here anymore. It just doesn't matter, and you have no care in the world for her.
Well, did you see McConnell fell down again today?
Oh, were he and Biden do-si-doing or something?
He tripped over. He was supposed to step up onto a stage, and
How old is
missed the step. Oh, at least I think he's only like 120.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that.
I was going to say 110.
Yeah.
But all right. By the way, I never did guess the song.
No, you didn't.
That was Milli Vanilli and Jefferson Airplane doing a duet.
No.
What was the song again? I don't remember it. Wait, I got to guess the title, right?
Yeah.
It was I Fought the Law and the Law Won or something? No, it was something about the law and...
it did talk about the law.
Okay, that's I get a little credit.
Yeah.
The law... Okay, give me a hint. I don't remember.
Oh, that's okay.
It was too long ago.
It's okay. I'm sure you wouldn't have got it anyways.
Of course I would have. It is, don't tell me. It is, what was that band Stevie Nicks was with?
Fleetwood Mac.
No, the other one. Just
Stevie
kidding.
Nicks.
I have no idea. I don't know who it was. I have no idea.
The song was Howling at the Moon from the Ramones.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Ramon.
I think there was a D on the end
Yeah,
of that.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Come on, we're normal. Oh, I kick my wife off. I do a Ray Romano.
Yeah.
That she just cannot stand when I do that. So we're normal. With the nasal. Yeah. It's terrible. Anyhow,
yes.
We have a distinguished guest, Jay.
We do.
We will keep the people waiting no longer. I've gone on a long enough tangent.
Well, it's not his first foray on the podcast, giving St. Augustine's Confessions. We have John Augustine here from the Legislative Evaluation Assembly. Yes.
We're not a political action committee. We do not endorse candidates or give money to campaigns, but we do recognize those that score highest in our annual report at our annual awards banquet, which is going to be on February 24th this year at the Mermaid in Moundsview. And so that report there is in front of you, and I'm here to talk a little bit about that report and the upcoming banquet and maybe some other legal and constitutional issues that have arisen in the wake of the last election here in our great state.
That's awesome. I would like to hold a banquet for the lowest scorers, like a Golden Turkey Awards.
Golden Turkey's a little too good of an award.
Right. We'd
give
have
him a used sock or something.
You know what? Who frequently are the lowest scorers are the ones that they vote wrong whenever they bother to vote, but then they also oftentimes don't even show up to vote. So that's the only way you can get a negative score.
Really?
Because you get deducted half the value of a score if you don't vote. And so if you vote wrong all the time and then a bunch of other times you don't show up, that's how you get a negative score.
Wow. Dang, that takes talent.
It does.
Yes, it does.
You got to work to get a negative score.
You do. There are people that have done it.
Wow. Voting present. Well, John, we've had a nightmare 2 years in this state. And obviously going into, I want to go backward to we're going to go backward to last year. But we got a little bit of a slightly different legislature this time if they ever meet. I got to ask you something first off. I am one that hopes they never meet. I hope they don't meet all year. I go fishing in late May, right when the session ends, May 22nd or something. Yeah. I'm always gone that week. And it's so awful. I tune out everything for like 5 days. Then I come back and see all of the stuff they passed in the last 5 minutes. Or a special session that lasts 15 minutes or whatever it is, where, they always go a little overtime. Am I gonna have the pleasure of not having that this year?
I wouldn't bet against there being a special session because they're getting such a late start, and it's more contentious than usual because one caucus has decided to not show up at all, and therefore they're not allowing the other caucus of people that got elected and have election certificates to try to do any work at all. So it's a little more contentious and less collegial than in the past, and even the last couple of years when the DFL had narrow majorities, they pushed everything as far as they could except for the bonding bill, they didn't need any Republican votes, so they didn't compromise. They didn't cater to any concerns of those legislators or their constituents. So,
in fact, they shut down discussion at least one time, if not more, on some bills, so that Republicans couldn't even publicly give their points of view, right?
Yeah, they when Republicans' only recourse was to try to speak on the floor against something and just kind of make the public case against something, because they for a number of years the amendment process has been kind of short-circuited in that you have to let the leadership know 24 hours in advance or so if there's going to be any amendments introduced. So then they've got time to get all their troops in line. So the idea of somebody actually proposing an amendment that can bring people together and get more support on the merits on the floor is kind of disappeared.
They want to know the amendment so they can get the votes against it or for it. Mm-hmm. But, John, just real quick, talk about like the mechanics of the legislature now. If you go back 15, 20, 30 years, there were thousands of bills or hundreds that would come in the House and Senate. They would have a bill on almost everything. Now, everything gets put...
Well, they still introduce a lot of bills, but they get held over for inclusion in larger bills.
They don't have a small
So whereas in the early 1970s, there were actually sessions where they passed over 1,000 individual bills.
Wow.
And now, if there's 100 in a session, it's a lot. So.
Which, of course, in my opinion, violates everything that our state constitution says.
Yeah,
Yes.
laws to embrace only one subject. Article 4, Section 17. No law shall embrace more than one subject, which shall be expressed in its title.
So why has that been short-circuited? Why are 100 bills going into one and passing as what they call the big O, the omnibus? Why do they do that now versus if everybody agrees on
things
something
done? And just you're talking a little bit at the national level too. I mean, it's a
happens a lot there.
The concentration of power. The special interests have more chances to insert things into larger bills that maybe wouldn't pass on their own merits, and they only have to garner the support of whoever controls those couple of great big bills, instead of having to line up support from a lot of legislators. If they can get the key people negotiating what goes into the great big bills, then they can control the agenda much easier. So, and then as far as why this has been allowed to happen, well, we've had very liberal courts for a long time certainly in the state anyway, and they have interpreted it so if a title for a bill for one of these omnibus bills can be 4 pages long, so as long as it's in the title, it's still okay.
So if you got a bill
though that's really stretches what's one subject. If you should be able to vote against one thing and not have to vote for something else that has nothing, that really has very little or anything to do with it.
Yeah, so 2 things on that. So if a bill's about education, 200 laws on education could be in that bill. Mm-hmm. And again, and
departments, the executive departments they'll propose those department bills. They'll say for Department of Health or Department of Education, they'll put together their wish list of what they want passed, and then they'll throw all those policies into one bill. And this is our policy bill for the year. So.
Well, and where is forget who the governor is now. Okay, forget that. Mr.
That's really hard to do.
Yeah, but I mean, where is the governor? Has so much power with a line item veto, which I wish we had at the national level too. Why is it never exercised?
Well, the governor's been able to exercise his power without having to
veto anything.
Veto it. Yeah. I mean, you go back to Arnie Carlson, Jesse Ventura, Tim Pawlenty, Mark Dayton. They all had plenty of vetoes during their term. Governor Walz, we're going on what, the seventh year of his term, has vetoed one bill in his entire time as governor.
Why do we even have a governor?
I mean, because he was able to he's been able to dictate the agenda of what even gets presented, gets to the floor, and therefore doesn't have to lose any political capital vetoing anything.
That's yuck. Yeah. I just can't believe that he hasn't vetoed something just like out of spite.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
when it's your own party, I guess.
The only thing is vetoed. Do you know what it is?
Was it? It was like wasn't it had to do with the cab drivers something?
It was. It was in 2023. It was the first version of the both versions were ridiculous, but even the most ridiculous version of the rideshare
that was it.
bill.
Yeah.
And some of his own constituencies were very concerned that it was going to jeopardize services that they rely on for their clients, and therefore he vetoed it. But then they came up with some other different version of it that passed as part of a larger bill last year. So.
It's just, you see all this winning at the federal level. We're not doing so much winning at the local level. This year we're starting to hold our own and not get pushed around, and that might be the start of something, but it's definitely not the experience that we've had. So, I don't know. Yeah, there were some really bad bills that got through last year.
Yes, I mean there were so many in 2023 that there was more than things that we would have written about in a normal year report. We didn't even have space. We expanded the report by 4 pages, and we still didn't have space to write about all the stuff they jammed through in 2023.
Yeah, you could have outdone Moby Dick.
But in 2024, they passed in 2023 3 or 4 different bills. I mean, at the time of the 2022 elections, we already had some of the most liberal election laws in the nation.
Yes.
And then they found ways to double and triple and quadruple down on that in 2023. And then they passed another election bill without really any elections to demonstrate how the 2023 laws were working. In 2024, they passed another elections bill, which has some truly revolutionary language in it that I don't even know if it's been adopted by any other state. It's part of something called the Minnesota Voters' Rights Act that they threw into this bill. And basically, it kind of enshrines cultural Marxism as the basis of election law legitimacy. If you are recognized as a protected class, you're able to pursue. You can pursue remedies if they decide that your representation has been diluted or there's been polarized voting, where they call it, where the preferences of the electorate don't sufficiently represent the preferences of the protected classes. So because they've had legislative findings concluding that there's various socioeconomic inequities and history of discrimination, and therefore they can pursue legal remedies if elections don't turn out in a way that they're viewed to represent the protected classes. So courts, this didn't happen in the last election because they didn't need it yet or didn't think they needed it yet. But now that they have this tool in their toolbox, it's something that we should expect when we see from time to time going forward. And somebody's really got to challenge it, because
somebody's got to test this out. They're going to do it because they've got to test how far it can go.
So the courts are required to act on challenges filed in an expedited manner. Factors can be used as evidence of violations include overt or subtle racial appeals by campaigns or officials. Well, that's very subjective and doesn't mean anything. They are the lack of responsiveness to the particularized needs of protected class members. The courts, so the electoral choices of a protected class deviate from the electoral choices of voters in general. So if that happens too much, then the election can get thrown out, basically.
So let me translate that then. If, let's just say, I don't know what the definition of a protected class is, but let's just say 51% of a district is a protected class. And by that, I'll just say they're not white, which is probably largely the answer. And a white person is their rep. Is 51% of that district then not represented and can seek regress? Or does one particular class able to do that? Hey,
It can be an individual member of the protected class. It can be a group representing a protected class, or it can be the Attorney General actually initiating the challenge. And then you might want to know what the remedies are, right? The legal
Yes.
remedies if they decide that this election has been too polarized or has diluted the votes of
too
protected classes.
polarized.
I mean, this is what you learned in your civics classes in high school,
Yeah.
right? Growing up.
Yeah.
No
I mean,
kidding.
this cultural Marxist claptrap. But suggested remedies include alternative polling places more accessible by protected classes, alternative methods of election such as proportional, cumulative, or ranked choice voting, or overturning redistricting. So,
Overturning redistricting.
yeah.
How can you overturn that one if it's done
that's
by
happened
population?
quite a bit in a lot of other states over the past 10 years. They've gotten various courts to say that this district isn't drawn in such a way that mirrors the ethnic makeup or something of a particular area, and therefore they redraw the boundaries. I mean, that's happened in a bunch of areas.
So
But the idea that you can just invalidate an election that has already occurred.
Not only
because of
that,
that.
but if you're going to redraw districts, don't you got to redraw every one of them? I mean,
Well-
by redraw your district where you live,
Yeah.
that affects. You and I are next door to each other. We're in different districts, but
Yeah.
that would affect my district.
It
then,
would.
right?
It would. So are the judges redrawing the districts, or are they sending it back to the legislature to redraw the districts?
Ends up in the court anyway, Jay.
Well, it
ends up-
does, but right now the
I mean,
judges don't redraw the districts.
Yeah,
it
that's
goes back
true.
to the
Well,
legislature.
Wait for Keith Ellison to
It-
push it.
the statutory power, or maybe it's in the Constitution too. I don't know. I wasn't going to talk about that, but the legislature is still supposed to be at the focal point of redistricting, but it almost always devolves to the judges because they don't come to any consensus, and then they issue it so late that it advantages the insiders and incumbents, because the challengers or people who go to caucuses, they don't even know who their rep's going to be, who they're going to be able to challenge.
That happened in 2012. It was so late.
It happened in 2022 as well.
Here's the thing. Jay, we've talked a lot about elections across the country. And look, I'm the biggest states' rights guy that there is. But when you look at elections, and I think there's real equal protections under the U.S. Constitution, and we've talked about, is it fair that one state does elections totally different than the next state? I mean, is it, because look, who's in Congress and who's in the Senate and who's in the president affects all of us.
Yes.
Okay. So is it fair that one state allows same day registration and the next state doesn't? One state has photo ID and the next
Alaska
state doesn't.
has the senator they do because of ranked choice voting.
Exactly. Maine's adopted a version of that too. I mean, you have all of these different things. One side has X amount of time for early voting. One side doesn't. One side allows these drop boxes, and and outside of Georgia, you haven't seen many states reform this in the past couple of years. I mean,
Right.
South Carolina still counts by paper ballots. I mean, what? And look, I'm not for putting some knucklehead in Washington in charge of it. I'm just saying voting is very decentralized in this country, and I believe there's a real equal protection question about that, and whether that's really fair, because the snakes go where it's wet, not dry. So I don't know.
One other thing I wanted to bring up about this election bill before moving on is that they also, and this is being challenged in court. There's a thing about deep fakes. So deep fakes would be prohibited within 90 days before a nominating convention or after the start of absentee voting periods, with severe penalties for candidates who use them. I mean, you can be like taken off the ballot. You can be barred from even running again ever as a candidate if they determine that you used deep fakes, and that's really subjective. One person's parody is another person's deep fake. So
Yeah, but the way these things always work, it's like, oh, I'm not doing it. I'm just giving money to somebody else to do it. Keith Ellison's campaign committee isn't going to be coming up with deep fakes on whoever's running for AG next time. It's going to be Act Blue funnels money to some shadowy organization that we can't pin down.
Alliance for a Better Minnesota.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm. So one other bill I really wanted to mention that they passed and is the misleadingly called Education Supplemental Budget Bill. So it is, well, first of all, the budget grew exponentially in 2023. So why did they need a supplemental budget? Because that set the budget over a 2-year period. So
the biennium.
So right,
yes.
but they passed in the supplemental budget, but and most of that money was money going to school districts for teacher compensation related to implementing the READ Act and so forth. But the more egregious stuff is they also threw into this supplemental budget bill a whole bunch of new policies. So you've got they covered a few interests. People like to get paid whether or not they work. Like some of the legislators are doing right now. But
I love how the DFL says that they're talking about bills and stuff right now. It's like,
right.
Really?
So the requirement that all school employees be paid full wages and benefits for e-learning days. So then that was expanded to cover full pay on partial day school closures, including for closures of before and after school programs. So if somebody's works in a cafeteria at school or before or after school care, and they don't actually have to work that day, they still get paid. So, okay.
Yeah, but John, let me ask you this: isn't that something that should be negotiated in a contract between a district and the employees? I mean, are they so they're requiring that to be put in a contract? I guess.
So a couple of years ago, they redid the social studies standards and put all kinds of ethnic studies requirements into it, and indigenous education and all this so forth. And so in this education supplemental bill, they also added a new graduation standard last year. They added the graduation standard of health. Okay, so the public health bureaucracy, they really did well, right, during the COVID hysteria.
I was about to say, how many shots do they have to take now?
So do you really want these people determining what the graduation standards are going to be when it comes to the area of health? They must include topics of mental health, vaping, cannabis, substance use, and sexually transmitted infection education, and may include safe and supportive schools, anti-bullying education. So there's obviously ways that they can put ideological agendas into that.
Absolutely.
As part of the health graduation standards.
Yeah, when you're dealing with anti-racist policy, anti-bullying really means being able to bully the people they see as oppressors versus just getting rid of bullying altogether.
Yeah, and it's nice to know that they're not worried about math or English or science or anything like that.
One other thing they threw in there is they removed the conscientious objection exemption for immunization for if licensed daycare center decides they want to require that, then they removed that. They threw that into that education supplemental bill.
I didn't even hear about that.
That's why they do it that way. Yeah. So you don't get to. So, but anyway, so those were some of the worst parts of the 2024 session. They actually passed a couple things that we scored favorably, but by and large, it was not, as you might suspect, it was not a good session as well.
No.
So.
Oh boy, yeah, that's no good.
So any of the honorees interest you? With how we got?
Yeah.
What?
Let's see
What
who's doing well? Actually, John, can you talk about something you scored favorably? Like the one or two things maybe that anything that was good come out of the last 2 years?
Well, we scored and it was imperfect, definitely. But the human rights law, you may have heard about that they when they changed the human rights law in 2023, they did not with the language on gender identity, they did not extend any kind of religious freedom exemptions as part of that. So they changed that in last year to clarify that there were religious freedom exemptions for various organizations and so forth. It'd be nice as an individual or a business living out your own, trying to live out your own worldview to be able to act in such a way as well. But nevertheless, they got that religious freedom part in. They did add language related to rights related to a jury trial with added civil penalties paid to the state in addition to the damages paid to a aggrieved party for human rights violations. So in return for allowing this religious freedom exemption to come back, the majority actually spurred the incentive for more human rights lawsuits because now the state is going to get money when there are, and more damages are available as well. So it's certainly not a great bill, but we thought it was important to get that religious freedom exemption returned.
Yeah, that was a real fiasco. I was at the Capitol when they were dealing with that, and how the Democrats just shut down. There were like 100 pastors that were in the Capitol that day, and they decided that they, being the Democrats, that they were just going to ignore that we were there, that we had filled in the balcony, that there were so many of us we couldn't even all get into the balcony of the House that day, and that they shut down dissent. I know Harry Niska tried to get an amendment attached. They wouldn't even allow debate on that amendment. It was awful. I mean, we all left there feeling, not listened to. Obviously, the Democrat Party put itself in a place of being opposed to Christian leaders and Christianity that embraces a biblical view of the faith, and it was something to see, and really a warning sign to any Christian church how important it is to vote, and to vote along your values.
Not capitulate. Yeah. So many of them have capitulated.
So the other bill was a fix to the school resource officer problem. They had where a bunch of, they were telling trained and licensed law enforcement or school resource officers that they couldn't use various types of restraint techniques and so forth, and micromanaging how they can control a situation, and so a lot of the resource officers just said, we're not going to mess with this, we're just going to get out.
Yeah, police departments were pulling them. Yeah.
So they did things there to give them enough reassurance that they could come back and actually do their job if they have to in the districts that need them. So
That's not much for a couple of months, I'll tell you.
No.
so,
Ouch.
Yes.
so-
I was just going to ask a question looking at these things, because so much of it ends up in these omnibus bills, or as I call them, ominous bills, that how can we as just regular old voters demand of our elected officials, and like, we're not going to have sway over Democrats, but over the Republicans, to stop with this omnibus stuff? I mean, that I think you agree that that's important.
Certainly. I mean, and it comes up the most when it comes to when you're talking about entirely new policies or entirely new sections of law being inserted into larger bills. I mean, if something has never been law, why shouldn't that be voted on individually? I mean, that certainly was the intent of our Constitution. So, I mean, I guess at your individual local caucus level, your district level, that you to make sure your rep knows that, you know, we need to see that this stuff doesn't get all thrown together, that, you know, we don't want to have to vote for every wish list policy just to get one policy changed. So, I mean, and that message is, reps might stand up to the leadership, or might, when they have their elections of leadership, make sure they elect leaders that reflect that. So, because for the people that have the most power, the legislative leaders and the governor, there's no incentive for them to change the system.
Right. Oh, goodness.
I know, it just seems like kind of like a recent thing, like the last maybe 10 years or so, maybe even less than that.
It's been going on for a while, but it keeps getting, you know, it doesn't get better.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of thing where 500 things pass and it takes you 3 months to unravel. Well, like, the legislators don't even know what's in it. I mean, they're given the cliff notes. And yeah, I'll tell you what, another thing that drives me nuts, John, is they should have to do all their negotiating in public. I keep coming back to if a school district or a county board or a city council can't go behind closed doors and horse trade. Mm-hmm. They have to do everything out in the open with 10 days notice.
Right. Yeah.
The legislature can go...
Right.
They can go for the weekend up to Mille Lacs and come back. Oh, we got a deal. Mm-hmm. It's like, whoa, they're violating their own open meeting laws.
Right.
Which I think that's another thing that has to happen. I want to see what's traded for what.
They're violating quite a few laws here in constitutional provisions here just since the last election, the way things are going. And
oh, I know.
so, I mean, the legislature, have they been sworn in? Have they all been sworn in or not?
No.
They're supposed to be sworn in. It specifies in the Constitution how they're supposed to be sworn in. But they held a renegade ceremony in the Minnesota History Center with a retired judge. And that may or may not even be valid. They also... in Article 4, Section 12 of the Constitution, it says, neither house during a session of the legislature shall adjourn for more than 3 days, except for Sunday, not to any other place other than that in which the two houses shall be assembled without the consent of the other house. So the Senate has been meeting regularly, but the House has been adjourned all along for well more than 3 days.
Yeah.
So
going on a month almost.
So that's in direct violation of the Constitution. And then we had this court decision regarding quorum, which there are past precedents contradicting the way that court decision came out. But nevertheless, it also, even with that, it says that a smaller number than a quorum may adjourn from day to day and compel attendance of absent members in order to get quorum, in the manner and penalties they may provide. But they're adjourning and they're not being able to compel attendance of absent members. So it's there's just all kinds of things. An omnibus bill, was it in 2023 or 2022? I don't even remember. But one little thing that they threw into an omnibus bill a couple of years ago changed the start date of session. It used to be, first Tuesday in January or something for the beginning of the legislative term. And in the Constitution, it specifies that's when the legislative term begins. And they didn't change the Constitution, okay? But they passed something that says that they can wait until the second Tuesday or something in January, or after that holiday or whatever. Because the legislators and their staff is like, well, it's hard to negotiate the transitions and stuff over the holidays. It'd be so much easier if we just waited. But so now
you only had since the first Tuesday of November.
What that did is we now have a period of time in which we don't have any legislature at all. So this case where the person Curtis Johnson, who was a contested election, because he didn't live in the district, and the judge ruled that they had evidence was compelling that he didn't live in the district. So that case, the person who was Walz issues a writ of special election, which was thrown out by the Supreme Court, to their credit, because it wasn't vacant yet. There was still a sitting legislator. But her term ended constitutionally like January 5th or 6th. But the session didn't begin until the 14th. So who's the legislature between January 5th and January 14th?
They're all vacant.
So where's the balance of power there? Yeah. So that just creates all kinds of opportunities for mischief. I mean, pretty simply drafted. It says that aligns those dates. That whatever is in the Constitution should match the start of session.
And by the way, you mentioned the quorum, and remember you and I talked about this when that happened. So you need 68, which is Bull. I mean, let's say a member of let's say somebody somebody dies in the House. We don't wait until that person gets elected to form a quorum. Somebody resigns on a city council. They say, "Oh, well, we'll change the." I mean, what? I knew that they would side with the DFL, John. But what's the legal rationale for that? It goes against every precedent that's been set. If I understand it right.
Well, yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I was not that involved in that particular research or decision. I was more involved in the special election challenge.
Are you talking about the Curtis Johnson or the Brad Tabke case?
No, the writ of special election being issued on December 27th or something, and another one on the December 30th. So they could have challenged both of them, which I think would have been very interesting if they had done so, because there were ways to challenge both of them.
Are you talking about the Senate one?
The
where
House
you had a
and
death?
the Senate one.
Okay.
So the governor does. I mean, if there's a death or a resignation, I mean, Curtis Johnson couldn't resign because he was not an elected official. He was not an elected office holder. Mm-hmm. He was not sworn in. He wasn't an incumbent. Could not resign. So, but if somebody resigned, or someone dies, then the governor is empowered to. In fact, it has to, within a fairly short period of time, put out a writ of special election setting up the timeline for a special election. But they didn't. But this one was a result of a successful election contest, and there's a section of statutes that pertains directly to that. And so they didn't follow that. It says that the writ has to be issued 22 days after the start of session. And instead he did it during Christmas vacation. And the legislature ultimately, so the court ruled that there was compelling evidence that Curtis Johnson didn't live in the district, was not eligible to represent.
No, that's not true. I heard
but
him say that he came home at night, didn't turn on the lights because
he didn't have never had any power to turn on the lights. never bothered to sign up for power.
Right.
So
Didn't light a match.
But anyway, they didn't. It was supposed to be 22 days because even though the court said that, the legislature is the ultimate final arbiter over whether or not the eligibility of the members to serve. Yeah. So if the legislature could have decided that we don't agree with the court's interpretation, we're going to have a hearing on this ourselves and make our own decision. So they can't. So they can't wait. They had to wait until after the legislature was in session for this to be resolved. But they didn't want to because they didn't want even one extra day where they didn't control as much power as they possibly could. They didn't want any point where the Republicans would have any advantage to move anything or pursue anything. So, I mean...
Well, and then how about having the election, 3 or 4 weeks later? It's like,
Yeah.
but you got to have a primary and then have a...
Yep, that's all part of it, but the other part, this is why even the one where the senator died, that one also could have been challenged because they had... That one, yes, he can issue the writ when he did, right away after the senator passed away. But the filing period was 1 day. December 31st, it was done. So because that way they could try to get both special elections held before the end of January and minimize the amount of time that in seats that they thought they could easily control where they could, regain those seats. But if you have a 1 day filing period, well, that it says we have statutes that say it has to be posted in at least for 5 days after the election writ is issued before you can close the filing period. So they disregarded that even for special elections. And think about people that are not in major parties, so they have to go around and get petitions, right?
Yeah.
Qualify by petition.
Signatures.
Signatures. So they're supposed to be able to do that in 24 hours.
That's hard enough to do in 30 or 60 days.
During Christmas vacation.
Yeah.
Right.
So
hey, if the legislature can't get together and do a transition.
So I mean, they
should have challenged.
They probably figured the cases were similar if they got the one that it would establish precedent for both, but the one didn't impact when he could issue. It was when they could set the dates for it, just because they closed the filing period prematurely on the Senate one. But the irony is that if the governor and the DFL legislature had actually come, if everybody agreed to show up for session when session started, the first thing that the Republicans tried to do was they passed a resolution saying that we agree with the court's interpretation. We're not going to challenge it. So by doing that, then instead of having to wait 22 days, the statutes say they only have to wait 5 days. If the legislature passes a resolution that says that they're not going to challenge the court's interpretation. So if they had done that, they could actually have filled that vacancy faster than they're going to be able to now. Now they just decided there's going to be a special election March 11th. They could have filled that by the end of this month if they'd actually shown up and recognized. But they're saying that none of what the body did, resolutions or anything else, are valid because they didn't have a quorum. So now they can't recognize that resolution that would have actually allowed them to fill the vacancy earlier. It's all about being able to maintain their own hold on power.
Knuckleheads.
And then it's interesting also to me that it's like, well, they spoke in November that they wanted a balance of power because we're not voting for people. We're just voting for our preferences in our various districts. Whether the people are qualified or what, that's irrelevant, right? So I mean, these people are entitled to having a left of center representative just because they voted that way in November for a candidate that wasn't eligible to be on the ballot anyway. And you have that in the Senate too in Woodbury right now. They're entitled to have representation, even though this person has been arrested, has been charged with felony. So.
Yes, indeed. This person being Nicole Mitchell, Senator Nicole Mitchell. I'll be polite about it.
Yeah. So after the 2024 session, once they didn't need her vote anymore, some of the people in her own party said she should probably resign, but she didn't.
Yeah.
And
Walz said that himself.
Yeah, I think Aaron Murphy, the Senate Majority Leader, said that too after the session was done.
Right.
After they didn't need her vote
after
anymore.
all the damage.
Right. So, but if you're caught with cat burglar outfit and tools in the middle of the night in a different part of the state, chances are your job prospects aren't going to be that good. So might as well keep that legislative pay going as long as you can.
I would. Well, the bottom line is they do need her vote right now.
They do. So all of a sudden you're not hearing calls from those same people saying she should resign, right?
Yeah, you'll hear it in May again. In May, Esme Murphy will do a hard-hitting interview and make sure she gets that scoop.
Right. Oh, boy. I'm not going to hold my breath for that one.
Well, like I told you, Jay, when they passed the abortion stuff, I was all for it because I want to beat California. If we're going to be the best at something or the worst, let's make sure we're number one.
No, I'd rather not.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather fix things. Winning is more fun.
Yeah.
That's what I've found out. So,
well, I figured if we had a chance to finish last, then we ought to be the Jets.
oh boy.
So, John, let me ask you this. I mean, if the legislature ever does meet, and quite frankly, I don't care if they do or they don't, any ideas as to what's on tap? How are they gonna arrange the House to have a power sharing agreement, which I don't even get how that would work, because I don't know who'd run the committees or how you'd get something out of committee, or if you stack 8 Democrats and 8 Republicans, how would that work? I mean, have they talked about that? Has anything leaked out?
They did talk about it before
before the temper tantrum here.
No, before the Curtis Johnson thing came.
Oh, okay.
When it became clear that that Curtis Johnson wasn't going to be able to serve, then all of a sudden Republicans said, "Well, hey, it's not a tie anymore. You don't have a validly elected rep in that area." So just like the Senate had a 34-33 DFL margin, they didn't have a power sharing agreement, right?
Yeah.
So and now that they filled their vacancy for that deceased senator, it went from 33-33 back to 34-33. All of a sudden, they terminated that power sharing agreement. It's back to the good old days there, right?
Yeah.
So, but we have to. But the Republican side, I shouldn't say we, because we're not partisan. But the side that is favoring more of the constitutional issues and so forth, that and limited government, that we have to restrain ourselves and just allow everything to go through. So. And you wonder why we got this balance in the first place, right? Because so they passed all this stuff that just blitzkrieg of way far left stuff in 2023 especially, and one incumbent legislator lost. So,
Unbelievable.
so and in my district, it's a swing district, the candidate campaigned on bringing balance. So we got our balance, but what does it mean? What are we going to do? What do we want to advance? What do we want to stop? Those things, we'll see, So, that was kind of the campaign. I mean, they kept trying to embarrass him, obviously, and justifiably so, for the constant drip of fraud that keeps coming out. But there wasn't. But it was more just about bringing balance, is what I heard in my district when it came to the campaign, and that's the way so they weren't really out on a limb during the campaign or during the session last year. So we scored all 201 legislators on the same 16 bills in 2024. But if you look at the honorees, what do we got? 11 senators. So because the House was up for election and they were a little more cautious, they weren't sure, and so that's what that's kind of where we're at. So, but I do think that Representative Niska has made some pretty good moves in terms of trying to set the tone as a majority leader, and
Absolutely.
I think things are can go in the right direction. But anyway, for the upcoming banquet in a couple of weeks, we'll be honoring those senators that scored highest last year with awards, and we're bringing in a national speaker as well. So it's going to be somebody who served in the first Trump administration, also a former attorney general. So he should be able to talk a lot about legal and constitutional issues. He served in Homeland Security and Immigration Services, so he can talk about fighting illegal immigration, and also he is currently the national chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative. His name is Ken Cuccinelli. So you can register for that banquet by going to lea-mn.org. And early registration deadline is February 8th. So I would encourage people to do that, because it's a rare opportunity to hear from someone who served in the first Trump administration in number of capacities and has a wide background that can share a lot of information with us. It's $60 paid in advance or $65 at the door. You can register online, or there's an address as well that you can send in payment. So.
Well, we got to come up with an award for the person who scored the -9 here. Omar Fatah.
He's running for Minneapolis mayor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I always said this: it can get worse than Amber Fry or whatever his name is.
He's worse.
It can get worse.
Well, he's tried to. I think part of that was he boycotted his own legislative leadership. On a couple of the final days in order to get the deal that he wanted on the rideshare bill. So if he doesn't show up, if it's 34-33, what can they pass, right?
Yeah.
So he had any individual member that really stuck out and was willing to do it had a lot of leverage.
Yeah.
And if you're in a district where you're not there, it's a one-party district. So
got a lot of those.
So that's probably how he got that dubious award.
Well, here's the other thing. Why do we have so many legislators? We just have way too many legislators.
We've always talked about a unicameral house.
Yeah.
Things are going pretty good with just the Senate. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, there's just no reason to have a House and Senate. I mean, if you have a House and Senate at the federal level, the original intent was that the House was your direct representation. The
Right.
Senate represented the states.
Right.
So no law could pass without the consent of the people in the states.
Right.
Why we have it at the state level, I have no idea. And then you got the horse trading in. It goes to conference committees, and you know what happened. They meet behind closed doors, put 600 things in a bill, And I mean, that's what they used to do. Now it's an omnibus bill. But they do both, which is worse.
Yeah.
It's just, what's the point of the House and the Senate?
I don't know.
I mean, here's the only thing about a unicameral legislature, though. They could pass things even faster.
Yeah.
But I always say, too, it should be super majorities. I mean, all we do now is try to get a majority by one vote and then ramrod stuff. And that shouldn't be happening either. The 49% should be able to get representation from somebody. You'd think. So, I mean, like the bonding bill. Why does the bonding bill, the one thing that requires, and look what has to happen for that. Of course, I wouldn't vote for any of it. But, I mean, the point being that it's never one side that can just push through whatever they want to. Just make me dictator. I'll fix it.
John, before you had talked about the recall efforts, the petition that is going on, I just want to give the web address for people that want to go sign that. That is www.protectminnesota.co. www.protectminnesota.co. And by signing that, I guess you put your Democrat reps on notice that they will have to toe the line and get to work.
What's the procedure to recall someone in Minnesota?
There's a law that they're allowed to recall if they don't show up for work within...
is it?
There's not a time limit, which is weird. It's kind of a vague law where it says within a reasonable amount of time or something like that. I don't have the language right in front of me. If they don't show up and get sworn in and get to work, they're able to be recalled.
Really?
Yes.
So
they don't make it very easy to recall in
Yeah.
this state.
No.
Well, yeah, they make it easy to pass stuff, but not get rid of the people who.
Right.
But I go back to having 201 legislatures. If you had fewer districts that were bigger, maybe you'd have like more purple districts. I don't know. I just hate that we have, set 60 blue districts, 60 red ones, and we just fight over 10 of them.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. I mean, my math's off, but I mean that's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, it's just I don't know. They couldn't do something right if they tried. It's just
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it, that's for sure. Anything else that you want to say, John, or you want to...
Well, just that LEA is a grassroots citizen-supported organization. It's just $10 to become an annual member. And then besides getting the report, which is what we're most known for, our annual report and scorecard, you also get information about the annual banquet, people at the annual banquet that are members. Then it's also our annual meeting. We hold an election for the board of directors that's then tasked with overseeing the production of the next year's report. So it's all grassroots driven. And if I encourage you to go to the banquet, check it out. It's a fun time. You get to see the best senators, or just senators this time, but the best legislators from the last year's report. A lot of them, and we try to bring in a compelling speaker as well. And I think we have a good one this year in Ken Cuccinelli.
Yeah, that's great. Your organization, can you just briefly tell us, how it works? Because I don't think people understand everything that goes into this report. There's a handful of you that do research and
Right.
And it's kind of specialized, right?
Yeah, we do most of our work in the summer months between when the session ends, and try to get something out close to the primary, just to have educational material out there for people. So it's there's people that have served in the legislature. Jeremy Monson is on our board right now. We've had other legislators on the board in the past. People have served as staff. People who just have academic backgrounds, theological backgrounds, business backgrounds. I have a background in business and journalism. Education backgrounds, and so we just we try to pick bills on which there seems to be some constitutional or or central principles involved. And if you look at our credo, which is right on our website and the top of all of our reports, that's the kind of criteria we use on which to evaluate bills. So so some people occasionally put out scorecards. They'll just have the name of the bill and how we want you to vote. We'll give you basically what the bill does, what we think the impact of the bill will be, and then our reasons for or against the bill. So even if you disagree with us, you'll still learn something about the bill, and you'll have an understanding of how we arrived at the conclusions we did.
So, John, let me ask you this. A lot of organizations put out like a wish list for the legislature or like an agenda. Do you guys do a proactive thing too? Do you say, okay, here are the 5 things we'd like the legislature to do, or do you just react to the bills that come?
Generally, we don't do too much in the way as far as proactive. We do very little lobbying. We testified a number of years back against, and this effort always keeps coming back when they try to move the election cycle much earlier, because that short circuits abilities of challengers to mount effective challenges. If you when you move the elections much earlier, it moves the filing deadlines much earlier. The filing deadlines end up being way before a lot of the legislation is actually decided, so people can pass all kinds of junk and nobody can file against them. So that would be really bad. But it also.
Now, what do you say to somebody?
It would also disadvantage. It would handicap groups like us getting information out. Before some. I mean, if you put the elections before the work is even done, we wouldn't be able to get the word out on what work was being done before the elections occurred.
See, and I'm so torn on that because I hate an August primary when early voting starts 5 weeks later.
Right.
At the same time, if you move the primaries to May, John's right, you're going to end up with, oh, okay, I don't have a challenger? All right, I'll just vote for, and then we'll find out what's in the bill in July.
March. They'll put the filing deadline, December 31st of the previous year. So
yeah.
So that and there's that, and then the constitutional type issues we might get involved in from time to time. Like, I mean, this one came up. It's pretty egregious, I think, where we don't have a legislature basically for a little bit of time in January now, every 2 years, because of that dumb provision they threw in an omnibus bill a couple of years ago without changing the Constitution.
What does it take to get a ballot measure, John? A statewide one.
For the most part, the legislature votes to put it on the ballot. I mean, it would be hard. I think, regardless of what party you're in, it would be pretty hard to argue that there's a really good reason to have a different date for the start of the legislative term and the start of the legislative session. There's no justifiable reason for that.
Yeah.
So if you can get those to align, that should be, easy to pass. And if it's a simple enough issue that then it's on the ballot and it becomes.
It's just so weird. Remember the legacy money? Remember that year when that was coupled with something else? I remember I asked a legislator.
The arts and stuff like
that.
I
asked a legislator who was a friend of mine. Tom Emmer introduced. I can't remember what his name was. But I said, how did 2 things that have nothing to do with each other get on the ballot? Yeah. And the answer was, well, the proponents said that's the only way it would pass.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because I'm so torn on ballot measures. It's like, when do you use them? When should you?
In the last election, we passed one overwhelmingly. It was billed as the reauthorization of the Environmental Lottery Trust Fund constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. But in the language that for reauthorizing, they also basically created a bunch of ethnic set-asides and
of course
DEI stuff, which was not previously part of the trust fund, but now is. But they didn't put all that details on the ballot.
Of course not.
It's to educate the voters. So I mean, there's no.
I just vote no on everything.
Yeah.
That's my general rule.
Now we're generally against dedicated funds because
Yeah.
I mean,
California will never have any control over the spending if everything's dedicated.
right. So
You know,
I do like voting yes on things where it gets rid of things.
yeah, but usually a constitutional amendment, or
I
usually
know.
a ballot measure is for a
Yeah.
stadium or something.
I know.
I mean, it's usually pretty bad.
It is. Or it's like the marriage amendment, or it's,
I remember
it's-
that. I ran for office that year, running in a city race, and I kept getting asked about gay marriage. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can I ask you a political question? What do you see as? I mean, we live in a state that is. I still consider Minnesota kind of light blue. We're not a 70-30 blue state, despite not going on a national level. Okay, we have not voted for a Republican in my lifetime. Okay, and that's the try. I was not around for Nixon, but the Republican Party seems in this state. And I don't want to make it this red versus blue, but what has to happen for voters of Minnesota to change? What has to happen for, let's just not call it Democrat, Republican, call it people who support the Constitution, people who support limited government, people who, do not want this endless taxing and spending.
I mean, you just have to get involved at the community level. You just have to do the work. I mean, that's what your podcast is about, right? So I
Yeah.
mean,
We've been doing it a long time.
and it must feel like pushing a rock up a hill a lot.
Sometimes.
But, it's I mean, certainly sometimes to make an impact. I mean, you've got to hold people accountable wherever you can, and sometimes that might not win you friends. I mean,
Been there.
So you mean this is the best we can do in this district. So it's okay to have somebody that votes with you 30 or 40% of the time, right? So
There's a lot of people I'd take that from.
So I mean, you hear that a lot. So I mean, but you just got to call the shots as they are and let people know about it and get the word out as much as you can. And in the concentration of media for years in this state in one massively concentrated liberal market hasn't helped. I mean, Wisconsin, by contrast, has multiple media markets.
Yes.
And Iowa and so forth, and so that hasn't helped. The decentralization of media, I think, is the ability of information to get out and not be censored by the establishment media or by the COVID censorship regime. With that fading, I mean, it opens up more opportunities.
It's huge. If you watch President Trump, he made a point to really go after that alternative media like I haven't seen anybody else do.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of podcasts he went on, the amount of, I don't want to call it friendly media because that's not.
It's not really.
It's
it wasn't.
not so much that. It's where you could sit down for an hour or two, and it wasn't a 5-minute gotcha interview where
Right.
They just talk about 2020 and relitigate that 50 times. I thought he did a masterful job of going on all different sorts of things, and kind of frustrating the Bates. I don't need 60 minutes. I don't need you. I don't have to go on that anymore. I don't have to take your abuse. But I think you make a great point about how so many places are here or here on whether they've built up that alternative following or not.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to when talk radio kind of became the first alternative for a lot of us, especially people who want limited government and things like that, and an alternative to the corporate. I call it the corporate media. The 5 or 6 companies that control every single aspect of what we watch and listen to. And that has to be built up. And maybe in the long run, that's really the key. Exchange of ideas. I mean, if you watch Channel 5, mean, you do more journalism, and I want to say this too about your group, John, and your flyer here or whatever you call it. You do more journalism in these 10 pages than I've seen any local media do in the last 30 years, and that's no joke.
No.
I mean, nobody explains. They read the Cliff Notes and they move on to the next thing, and it's just a shame. I mean, it's really, really bad that that's the state we live in. I mean,
Right.
that can happen, and literally no one is there. All these alleged journalists from wherever the hell they went to school, Wake Forest or Duke or whoever, I don't know.
So,
I just watched some college basketball.
And I get involved in debate groups too. So I mean, because it's good to have your skills sharpened, even amongst conservatives and libertarians, that you can find issues on which to debate and plausibly disagree, and get your arguments formed so that when you run up against a genuine Marxist or something, that you're more prepared. So we've got one with the John Adams Society at Burger Mo's in St. Paul coming up. If you go to johnadamssociety.org, and that is resolved. It's time to end birthright citizenship. So that one's coming up here later this month. So we do 8 debates a year.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting because I think when President Trump did that, he knew he'd get legally challenged. I think he wants a fight on that.
Yeah.
And, I said before, the 14th Amendment to me doesn't. Army comes here and anybody born is a U.S. citizen. I mean, don't get me going on that. Don't get me going on that. I don't know. But I do want a June primary. Sorry, John. Actually, you know what I want more than that? I want you to have to register. I want to register with a party.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Well, there's if you're going to elevate the primary over the caucus convention system, you have to do that.
You have to because
you
only
can't have freedom of
Republicans.
association if the party cannot determine who their members are.
Exactly. Only Republicans should be able to vote for a Republican candidate.
Yeah.
The general election is to vote for whoever you want to.
I mean, I don't know what you can do to change it at the presidential level, but at any other level, I absolutely agree.
I mean, there's
And-
pluses and minuses to the caucus and primary.
The primary is going to advantage incumbents. It's going to advantage people that have the money and connections from the beginning. And if you elevate that over if you move the whole election cycle earlier, besides providing more jobs programs for political operatives,
everybody has to work.
But if you move the whole election cycle earlier, you're going to get way more primaries because there's no incentive. I mean, they'll have the filing deadline before the endorsing conventions can even occur, or like every 10 years you have redistricting. Usually that doesn't get decided until like middle of February. So if you put the primary in March and your filing deadline is, beginning of the year,
you got to have 45 days, right, by state law.
It's an insane amount of days that you got to have for a voting period and filing deadline. 70 to 84 days, I think, before the.
I think it's
election.
45 days from the early voting.
It's
starts,
70 to 84 days from the date of the election or something like that, or started voting. So,
well, you know what? How about another idea? How about the legislature just doesn't meet in the even year? How about that?
That was the case many years ago. There's still a few states that do that. I would be in favor of that.
Yeah. So then you
North
can.
Dakota is that way.
Yeah. So then you can move stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
The only thing that's bad about it,
you can have an earlier election in the off year if you're not doing anything in the.
Yeah.
off
The only
year.
problem with that is people forget stuff.
Yeah.
And what happens in like I've just been thinking about Trump the last 2 weeks, and I've forgotten 50 things he's done already. People, May of 2023, people forget sometimes by November of 24, and so maybe there's, there's pluses and minuses, I think, to anything, but I think maybe the way to have an earlier process is to not meet in the second year. I don't know. But then they wouldn't get their per diem, I mean, how many years are they have to get their like retirement and stuff or whatever they get the the people's the public employee retirement account. How many? They'd have to serve a lot more time to get that. So maybe they won't want to do that. I don't know. But if we're going to do a 2-year budget, and that's the most important thing, then all they could do is wreak havoc in the second year. Now, I could deal without a bonding bill.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. I could continue. You have an $18 million surplus, and you vote to borrow a bunch of money.
They oftentimes find a way to insert that into a budget year anyway. Even though
That's true. That's happened several times.
Yes.
You can borrow money to balance the budget, which is a very interesting thing. I took a cash advance on my credit card so that my monthly budget was balanced. Just crazy.
Oh, goodness.
But thanks, John, for all your work. You guys, this group, for all your work on this. And you guys do explain things, in good plain language, which is another complaint I always have of the legal jibber-jabbish. You read a bill, and at the end of it, I have no idea what it's saying.
Yeah, it's all lawyer speak.
Do you guys have legal people interpreting it with you guys, or do you just do it all on your own? You run it by anybody that can speak?
Well, maybe it's
politician.
Occasionally, if we come across something where we see people voted against something, and nobody. This is one of the pet peeves we have, is when it's people when they do vote no in committee or vote no on the floor, but nobody ever takes the time to speak on it and makes the public case against it. So then you have to do a lot more work to find out, well, why did you vote no? Because you didn't make any case against it. So then you have to do a little more digging in, trying to find different sources to find out.
Oh.
Yeah, or they just don't like whoever submitted it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, they assume it's going to pass, and that it's not something that's vehemently opposed in the polls or something. So they just rather not waste any political capital talking about it.
I see. But again, I mean, thanks for the work here. This is an easy read, and it really does bring out the, I would say, high points, but we can't really say there's very many of those. So
No. But we're super grateful for the work that you guys do, and
I'm grateful for the chance to publicize it more on your podcast. So.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
when I run for governor, maybe I'll come and address when I run for something. I mean, I can't take the pay cut right now, but at some point I will.
Well, I thought we were going to have to run for our lives until this last election. Now I'm a little more hopeful.
I'm a little more hopeful. I mean, being in Minnesota, hope is a
Right.
commodity.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different organizations in Minnesota on the conservative end of things. And we hear about the Democrat ones all the time because they're well-funded. The ones on the conservative side, really not all that well-funded usually. And if we would learn to work together and do our own part for the whole, I think we'd probably fare a lot better than we do. So...
Right. I mean, you need organizations that are involved in campaigns, but it's harder to be a credible evaluator if that's what we did. So that's not what we do.
Yeah, I mean, there's the groups, then there's the people who are in campaigns. They're not supposed to talk to each other.
Right.
There's always that. Of course, I worked for Americans for Prosperity for a while back in the day, and I remember
in the good days.
Yeah, it was just 10, 12. God, it was like 2013, maybe. I don't know. I worked with Paul Carlson and Ron Stoffel.
It's gotten a little messed up.
Oh, okay. I can't remember who the overall boss was. I knew him pretty well, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
Usually I don't remember. I usually don't forget people like that. But John something was his name. Obviously not you, but
When they jumped all in for Nikki Haley, that was a little weird. But
okay, I shouldn't have mentioned that in public because now I'm going to have to disavow it.
but you were there before then. So,
yeah, it was 2013, 14.
So your grandfather did, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Jay, do you have any word? I mean, I'm not going to play our theme song to end the show.
Okay.
We're going to take a break from that for one time. But
Fine.
you got any words of wisdom to end here?
Yeah, I think I just want to go back to the point that it's really important that we do something. Now, we shouldn't all do the same thing. There's a lot of different groups that are doing things, but there are individual things that we can do as well. If voting is the greatest part of what you do, well, that's not a lot. That's kind of that's the entry level into getting involved in politics. I mean, if it's something you're interested in, there's a lot more to do, whether it is helping out with the campaign and making phone calls and block walking, or whether it is actually helping out with a group like John's where you're doing research on different legislation, or whether it is helping to train candidates, or you're chasing ballots and you're getting people registered to vote. That is a very important thing. We have to be able to overcome the amount of fraud in the system from same-day registration and the ballot harvesting in Minneapolis. The only way to do that is to register voters and then chase ballots. And so we need a lot of people in every county to do that, because I know I've mentioned it on this program before. There were over I don't have the number right in front of me, but there were hundreds of thousands of same-day registrations in Minnesota. And I know some of that is people moving from place to place, but it can't all be people moving place to place when you have a state of 5 million people. You're not going to have a third of a million people that are moving and registering the same day. We know it because we've seen it, we've heard it. They bus people into the polling places, but the levels are across the state. We see across the state. I don't think there's a single county that fell below 70% voters.
And as a former election judge who's testified in front of the legislature, I could back that up.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a single county that fell below 70% of registered voters registering. And some of that is due to the same-day registrations, which aren't counted in the people that are already registered. But, again, if we're looking at fraudulent things, and when you have...
You can't verify their status either. I mean, so there's no...
Right.
We're one of the very few states that has same-day registration and no provisional balloting.
Right.
Yes,
So
they vote and we verify them after the fact.
We try to verify them after the fact. But if the postcard comes back unreturned or whatever, that ballot's already in the system. You can't retrieve it. You don't know who it belongs to.
Right.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So it makes everything a whole lot more complicated, which that's where we need you. I mean, that's where you come in, whether it's being an election judge, whether it's being, say you're a lawyer. You need to be available on election day to be able to stand watch. We need people in every precinct that have eyes on every ballot, so that there's a lawyer available to those people when there's a discrepancy, that they can be called in and we can litigate. That's how they won in Pennsylvania. That's how they won in Wisconsin. And we have to be able to do the same thing here. But it takes all of us doing our part. And it's as varied as the skills that we have. And so if you don't like to make phone calls, guess what? There's something else you like to do where you can really help. So I just urge you to get a hold of like your local Republican Party, or get a hold of us. You can do that at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. That's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. I'm sure that you can get a hold of John's group, Legislative Evaluation Assembly of Minnesota. Do you guys have an email, or is it just a phone number?
There is a phone number listed on the report and website. If you put in president at lea-mn.org, I think it goes directly to our chairman.
Awesome. So, if you like to do research, there's a million things that we can do.
Yeah, if you have a nose for research and writing, we're always looking for more people to help share the work on that.
Absolutely. So, there you have it. There's a ton to do, and if we all chip in just a little bit, I think maybe we can tip this next election, and we can do some good, just like President Trump's doing now. If we go in with an agenda that is aggressive and that rolls back all of this insane stuff that they put out, I believe that we can do it.
By the way, two
Yes.
things. Governor Richter has a nice ring to it.
Yeah.
And just remember, a friend in need is a pest.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. I don't know what that has to do with anything. But, all right. I guess since we're devolving into chaos, I will sign off and say, we love you, Minnesota, but now it's your turn to get to work.